I'm Kourtney Smith.
And I'm Elyse Sharp.
And we are two nerds who are here to make Shakespeare easier to understand.
In this podcast, we will explore as many dimensions to Shakespeare's plays as we can by looking at the text, examining the historical context in which the plays were written, and how his plays are viewed through modern lenses of feminism, racism, classism, colonialism, nationalism, ableism, all of the isms.
We will discuss how his plays shaped both the past and present, and, as theater makers, how his plays can be responsibly performed today, all while trying our best to approach his works without giving in to Bardolatry.
So, Shakespeare Anyone?
Hi, listeners. Want to support Shakespeare Anyone? Visit shakespeareanyone.com/support or check out the links in our episode description. Now, on to the episode.
Hi, Kourtney.
Hi, Elyse. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
I'm also doing pretty well. It was overcast in LA. It was a lot of gloomy weather. And then yesterday and the day before it was a heat wave. And now we're back to something reasonable. So yeah, that's pretty much how things are going. And I turned in my final paper for my last module for my MA in Shakespeare Studies. So that was a giant, massive cross off the to-do list, turn in 4,000 words. I feel really good about it.
Yeah, it's been very hot here. We had a little heat wave. So it was the perfect weekend to sit inside and watch 4 different versions of Henry V.
Yeah.
And that's what we're talking about today. In our wrap-up episode, we will be discussing 3 out of the 4 of those. But first, let's dive into a little bit of our housekeeping announcements.
Yes. So I want to announce at the top of the episode that we have 2 new Patreon patrons, and we want to give a massive shout out for those 2 Patreon patrons for joining our Patreon community. So thanks, and ever thanks to our Patreon patrons, Cuban and Paul Hopkins. We really appreciate you joining us over on Patreon, and thank you for supporting the podcast.
Yes, thank you so much to our new Patreon patrons. We're also super excited to announce that Shakespeare Anyone podcast is now a partner of Libro FM. Did you know that you can purchase audiobooks directly from your local bookshop? With Libro FM, you can pick from more than 500,000 audiobooks, including bestsellers and recommendations from real booksellers. You'll get the same audiobooks at the same price as the largest audiobook company out there. You know the one. But you'll be part of a different story, one that supports your local community. And right now, they have a special offer. Get 3 audiobooks on Libro FM for the price of 1 with your first month of membership using the link in our episode description.
That's the perfect thing for summer vacation.
Mm-hmm.
Get 3 books for the price of 1. Go sit inside with the air conditioning, go to the pool.
I do a lot of driving in the summer, a lot of car trips, road trips, and I love grabbing an audiobook and listening to it. Last summer, I listened to Shakespeare, The Man Who Pays the Rent by Judi Dench, and I got it from Libro FM.
Nice.
Yeah.
And Elyse, where can they find more information?
The link is in our episode description. Speaking of summer, Kourtney.
Speaking of summer, teachers, pretty soon it will be summer vacation. This is for teachers in the Northern Hemisphere, teachers particularly in America. During your summer vacation, if you want to reach out to Elyse and I and let us know what kind of resources you need for your classroom, this is teachers who teach Shakespeare, teachers who have taught Shakespeare, teachers who want to teach Shakespeare, please go fill out our teacher survey. Elyse and I are, during our summer vacations, well, my summer vacation, I work in schools, am working to start building resources and curriculum to help teachers teach Shakespeare in the classroom, and I need your help to do that. So if you want to share your experience, go to shakespeareanyone.com/teacher survey.
Also, on our website now, we have launched merch. If you haven't heard, you can show your love of Shakespeare and the podcast by going to www.shakespeareanyone.com/shop. The links to both the survey and merch are in our episode description as well.
And one last housekeeping announcement before we proceed with the episode. Elyse said that over the weekend we watched 4 Henry V's. We're going to be discussing 3 of them today. That means the other Henry V is going to be over at our Patreon as part of our Patreon bonus audio. If you want to hear us talk about that fourth Henry V,
Yep.
it's a mouthful. If you want to hear us talk about that fourth Henry V, go to www.patreon.com/Shakespeare Anyone. Check out the bonus audio there. And in advance, thank you so much for your support. So now that we have housekeeping out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about these Henry V's. But before we do that, I want to say, again, I think I mentioned this in our episode last week or the week before that. I cannot believe that we are at the end of our Henry V series. It always flies by so quickly. By the time we get to these viewings, it's dawned on me that we're going to be moving on to something in the future. And I honestly can't believe that Henry V is, that we're here. I honestly can't believe it. Time is flying.
Yeah, it's absolutely like wild to be here already and be watching all of these filmed versions of Henry V. So the ones that we'll be discussing are, of course, it wouldn't be a Shakespeare Anyone wrap-up episode if there's a Kenneth Branagh version that exists and we didn't find it at this point. So
Yep.
Kenneth Branagh's 1989 feature directorial debut. Then we also watched the Donmar Warehouse production from 2022 starring Kit Harington and the 2012 production from Shakespeare's Globe. So starting off strong and iconic with Kenneth Branagh's 1989 film. This, of course, stars Branagh in the title role of King Henry V of England. It also stars names like Derek Jacobi, Ian Holm, Brian Blessed, Emma Thompson, Judi Dench, Robbie Coltrane, and Christian Bale, among others. This received widespread critical acclaim and is often considered one of the best Shakespeare screen adaptations. And it received 3 nominations at the 62nd Academy Awards. Branagh was nominated for Best Director and Best Actor, and it won with its other nomination, Best Costume Design for Phyllis Dalton.
Yeah, the costumes were really incredible, I think.
Stunning.
Yeah. Yeah, this is also a stacked cast. So, like, going through this, it's like who's who of Shakespeare in 1989. Like, we were just missing, like, you know, Sir Ian McKellen and...
Patrick Stewart. They were busy.
Patrick Stewart. Yeah, they had some other obligation. They were at the, you know, Blue Rose Theater.
Way to tie it in to our last episode. I heard that he appeared in a production of with the Royal Shakespeare Company that was directed by Adrian Noble, that this production was perhaps adapted for the film version of the play in 1989. So he played Henry V, which sold out, and then 5 years later, he was adapting the play for film.
Okay. I can see that. I think there were some theatricalities to the film, like compared to the Hollow Crown, which was much more like cinematic. I can see it being somewhere in between stage and screen.
Yeah. Let's start off with what we liked about this film.
Yeah.
Derek Jacobi is the prologue in this. I think the chorus is really difficult for film because it is a very theatrical concept. And like, especially the first speech of the chorus is literally saying, hey, please excuse this production for not being able to have real horses or have real weapons and et cetera, et cetera. It's like a little difficult.
Oh, I agree.
It can be very difficult as an audience to be hearing that and then watch a movie where you do see those things.
Yeah.
But I think that what Branagh did well is the establishing moment is Derek Jacobi on a soundstage.
Yeah.
The speech itself is, you know, Shakespeare didn't have this word, but meta-theatrical when it's happening in a theater. And Branagh does adapt that, I think, really nicely and really effectively with Derek Jacobi being on the soundstage.
Yeah, I agree. Derek Jacobi was dressed in like contemporary modern clothing walking through. And so it was clear like, oh, the prologue is the director, is how I interpreted it. While there's all these set pieces, props and whatnot. And then all the other actors are dressed in a kind of period piece. So I think that he uses it very effectively because you're right. Like if there's a disconnect between the words and what the audience is seeing, it's kind of like, why didn't you just cut some of those lines about the wood and O?
Because it's famous and so you feel like you can't.
Yeah. But that was really one of my highlights. Like that was a very clever choice on the part of Branagh.
I also thought that there was an appropriate Branagh establishing shot. I flashed back to the establishing shot of Hamlet that we had feelings about and that we found kind of ridiculous. And I was like, oh no, this fits. Like, he is a king. He gets this grand entrance. And this being an early Branagh film, I was like, I also see that like some of these things he's been doing since the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah. He's taken it with him through all these other characters. And his Henry is very intense, very collected. There's kind of a severity to him. He seems very what I was thinking is he's totally devoid of Hal. Like Prince Hal is not there.
Yes.
And so in order to communicate to the audience that there is this former identity from the previous plays, Branagh also uses like these kind of like flashback scenes with Hal and the East Cheap Company to show that like the line that Canterbury and Ely have about like once his dad died, so did his,
wild ways, yeah. Or the line he has about like paraphrasing here, the Dauphin must have heard of my wild days and didn't understand the purpose of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I felt that was helpful, especially for a film like this. In flashbacks, we get a little bit of Henry IV Part 1 and Part 2.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that like, and I think about this a lot when it comes to the fact that I already know this play very well. So I always wonder how much kind of exposition from previous plays is too much.
Yeah.
For somebody who's not familiar with the play and they're just trying to like understand the geopolitical part of the play. And like the Falstaff stuff was written for the audience to explain why Falstaff is not in the play.
Right. Who are here for a sequel.
Yes.
Like Shakespeare's Anyone was here for a sequel. And for them, we have to explain why. Just like a Marvel movie today would have to explain perhaps like what happened to a certain character that you were expecting to see if you came to see this movie. So it's to mixed effect. I think that like when you have such an intense Henry, seeing Hal and never seeing other glimpses of Hal in Henry V, in the like text of Henry V as Branagh cuts it, while I personally like the framing of like who Falstaff and who the East Cheap Company are and how they are related to, I think it's most effective in establishing how Bardolph and Nym and Pistol are connected to Henry. But I think that like we don't necessarily need to establish who Prince Hal was. That's something that like I kept thinking about watching several of these. We'll come back to this conversation.
Yeah. I do want to say that the Bardolph execution scene, having the flashback was super effective. It made it clear why Hal, or Henry V, it explained his reasoning for being affected by Bardolph's execution. Because otherwise it'd just be some random soldier that he has no relationship with. So I think that like over-explaining Falstaff was kind of like a little much for me.
Yeah.
But the characters that are on stage, like the kind of glimpses and those little bits were like very useful and like contextualize the relationship effectively.
Yes.
But with Branagh, it's always like in moderation, my friend. I don't know. That's just my personal opinion.
I think overall, I found, as you said, like there's a very like intense, and this is something I'm going to like continue to speak about. I think this episode is that like having an intense Henry and focusing on the realities of war in this play makes a very serious play and a very serious film. And it can be sort of one note. And to me, what that meant was that like the Catherine scenes felt a little out of place because all of a sudden here was this world that I was not familiar with. And they do come out of like as written, they do sort of like show up all of a sudden. And there was just little humor in this adaptation.
Yeah.
So
the East Cheap Company felt very like, why are they even here in this film? Because they're funny, or they're supposed to be. The captains felt a little bit like, serious. Why are they here? They're supposed to be funny. They're so serious. Even the French nobles who are like, I think from our conversations that we've had, Shakespeare's play is mocking the French nobles in many ways by making them so sure of their ability to beat England and like, those just, those English,
Yeah.
But I didn't read the French nobles as being like so up their own, so pompous about their power and their strength because it was just so serious. So
yeah. And when everything is that serious, what we lose in the production is the conversation that Shakespeare has written of why do we go to war? And the scenes about King Henry speaking with the commoner when he's in hiding, and he's speaking to the commoners and hearing what they think about why they're going to war, we lose the sort of like breadth of humanity that is in this play, which is there are some people who have joined up, to get rich. There are some people who have joined up because they are kind of forced to, and they're like, well, I'm the king's subject, and so I have to.
Yeah.
And when everybody is like so serious, it can be actually hard to differentiate the different groups.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that there was a scene where I think it's in the camp when Henry's walking around talking to everybody, and the scene with Bardolph was like the same note as the scene with Williams and Bates. And I thought that the Williams and Bates scene was one of my favorites of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Branagh handled it very well, and I always really enjoy the like moral dilemma of the king.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a really good place to inform like how to play Henry, like what surrounds this moment. But the scene with Bardolph was just as serious. So yeah, I think you're right. There weren't levels. There wasn't any sort of ability to like differentiate, which was disappointing.
Mm-hmm. It peaks at the St. Crispin's Day speech in terms of like emotional high. As this big grand speech. Again, it's also Branagh's like the move is towards big and grand in these movies. I said it's both epic and not at the same time. There's attempts at this like epic storytelling, but there are moments that just don't quite, at least 30 plus years later, hit in the same way that they maybe did in 1989.
Yeah, and I think that that's a product of what we discussed in Much Ado, or the way that people perform Shakespeare now has changed.
And I would say the way that movies are made has changed. Like
That's true
there's
too.
a pace to this that is slower than I think a lot of modern movies. Like there were moments where I was like, this shot is lingering, and does it need to linger? Could it have cut 10 seconds off and moved us along, especially as, we're going to war,
Yeah.
But I think that's, again, it's to be fair to it, that's not a problem. It's just like it was made in a different time, and we can feel the distance of time.
Yeah. Yeah. There's kind of a slow as molasses feel to some of the scenes. But one high is that I really did like the long battle sequence.
Mm-hmm.
I love a battle sequence. I think that the film medium is really great for adapting Shakespeare in terms of like war stories.
Yeah.
Because the film used a lot of visuals to demonstrate things like the, who's fighting, Pistol and Nym stealing, the boy, Christian Bale, young Christian Bale, ran away.
Baby Christian Bale.
Yeah. And also just it's so cool to have like to actually have the horses and the weaponry and the like, everyone yelling like, I don't want to yell in the microphone.
Yeah.
But
also to see like I think one scene that is done really well is when Henry finds the boy and the luggage attendants dead, and has the I was not angry when I arrived in France till now scene. I think that is really well done.
yeah. I wish that, again, this goes to this very serious Henry. I wish that he was not so serious during the entirety of the film, so that maybe his, I know angry and serious are not the same thing, but
so that his anger had a better contrast. What was a contrast was something that we didn't feel like it was shades of the same, because intensity, he's intense serious and he's intense mad, and we didn't get the variation in intensity.
Yeah.
Did they keep the glove trick in this?
No, I'm pretty sure
he doesn't do the glove trick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Overall, I think that this is my favorite Branagh of the Branaghs we've watched, between like Hamlet, Much Ado, and this one. I think I like this one the most. I do like Much Ado, but I'm still very bothered by the hero Claudio stuff. So I think that this is my favorite Branagh that we've watched.
Yeah.
And I do think that the general message of the play is captured in this, in terms of like bringing this to students. But I also think that it's one note, and it's so serious that I can't quite tell if I actually do. I know I just said that you could show it to students, but I'm not quite sure if I would show it to students.
I think clips of it would be good. I think that St. Crispin's Day, the war, are kind of exemplar moments to show Shakespeare being performed on film.
I think that's a good strategy. Yeah.
And I would agree. I think this ranks above Much Ado for me in terms of the Branaghs that we've watched. Yeah. Now let's talk about the 2022 Donmar Warehouse production, which I think in many ways feels like an inheritor of some of the things that Branagh did. Like, it takes inspiration, or some choices maybe derived from choices that Branagh made 40 years prior.
Yeah. Who is it directed by? Who's in the cast?
Well, let's take a look. This is directed by Max Webster, and the note from the National Theatre at Home's website says that it explores what it means to be English and our relationship to Europe, asking, do we ever get the leaders we deserve? So this stars Kit Harington as Henry V and an ensemble cast of incredible actors who play multiple roles to create the world of a modern set Henry V.
Yeah. And this play, in addition to dressing modern, like it really is asking modern questions for a modern audience. And that's something that we talk about a lot, like why this play, why now?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we'll discuss the effectiveness or the messaging that comes out of, why Shakespeare, why now with a particular lens.
Yeah.
At the top of the play, before the opening chorus scene, there was a quote that was projected up onto a set piece. And the quote is, "There is no document of civilization that is not also a document of barbarism," by Walter Benjamin. And Walter Benjamin, I don't know a lot about him, but I looked him up. He's a Jewish writer, and he was living during the rise of Nazi fascism. So that's the kind of bare bones what I have of this person, but this is the quote that was projected up on as like the backdrop.
Yeah. And then the chorus comes out and introduces the play, and what we are introduced to is actually part of Henry IV Part 1. Like Branagh's version is able to, do flashbacks. We start with scenes from Henry IV Part 1 where we meet the Eastcheap. We see Prince Hal partying with the Eastcheap Company and Falstaff. And then there is sort of a quick cut to Henry IV Part 2, the end, after King Henry IV is dead and Hal becomes King Henry V, where he rebukes Falstaff and says, "I don't know you anymore. I don't know you, old man." And so we watch some like little scenelets from the prior plays to, again, establish who the Eastcheap Company are. And then we go into Henry V, Act 1, Scene 1.
Yes. I took note of them. It's a combination of Act 1, Scene 2 and Act 3, Scene 3 of Henry IV Part 1, and then Act 5, Scene 5 from Henry IV Part 2.
Yeah.
So interesting, like textual, work being done. And this Henry, Kit's Henry, is a king who, the way that I read it is that he's kind of a fish out of water who's being forced into kingship, and he's fighting his former self, Prince Hal. So like that opening diplomatic scene when Canterbury and all of the nobles and all of his court are talking to him about like his claim to the throne, it's very much like he's deciding whether or not he's going to be the king that, we see in Henry V.
He seems uncomfortable is what I wrote, which I also note is not exactly, for anyone who's not familiar with Henry IV Part 1 and Part 2, that's actually not exactly who Hal is either. We're introduced to Hal doing shenanigans with the Eastcheap Company, and then he immediately turns to the audience and says, "You need to know that I'm doing all of this because it will be so much cooler with how good of a king I'm going to be to have a redemption arc. Like, if I set expectations low and then really far exceed them, it's going to be, you'll be so astounded with like the 180 I'll do." And he says similar in Henry IV Part 2 to his father. It's doing a good job, but this does rewrite the character of Henry.
Yeah, I don't think it was necessarily like, in terms of trying to capture a certain type of storytelling, I don't think it was ineffective, but it doesn't go along with the text. It's like a choice that's against text.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. They continue to use the projections, that set piece that they're projecting onto, really effectively,
yes.
I think.
Yes.
They basically set up the claim to France speeches with a sort of like PowerPoint presentation that, and like when you read this aloud, you're like, oh my gosh, this guy just keeps going on and on. And there's like court members, ensemble acting, and Kit acting like, oh, this is hard to follow. Like, what?
And in some ways, it kind of reminds me of like reacting to Polonius, who's just long-winded about everything.
Yeah, it's very similar. Yeah, and like at the end, it's like, okay, but do I have a claim or not?
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, you do. Yeah, so it's very Polonius-like.
Yeah, but also for the audience, there was like a family tree. There was a map of Britain and France. There was a timeline. so that the audience additionally understands how Salic law gives Henry his claim to France. It was a super, super wonderful resource. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Another thing that is a strong choice of this production is that all of the French court scenes are entirely in French with subtitles. And live, I was able to see that they were projecting subtitles on other set pieces that were just like not captured 100% on camera. So
Yeah.
on film, we get the subtitles, which I think does help really separate France from England. At the same time, I was then reading the entirety of those scenes.
Yeah. I think that that's kind of the two sides of it, is that it makes the French much more French.
Mm-hmm.
It makes the two sides very distinct. It also places Catherine and Alice's scenes. It makes more sense that the two of them are speaking with accents and, you know, trying to translate French into English, because in the other ones I was watching, I was like, hold on. Like, you know, when you're reading the play, when you're reading the play, it's like one thing, but when you're watching and then you've got the French nobles and the French king all talking in British accents, and then you have Catherine and Alice speaking in French accents, it's like, what world is this? Like, why don't those actors have French accents as well?
Also, like, why doesn't this family speak the same language?
Yes.
Like, yeah, it feels like it really connects them more. And I also saw that they put the actor who plays Catherine in some of the early court scenes as like in the background, so she was present, which was also great because then we saw her before her scene.
Yeah.
And she was like a presence in the court.
Yeah. I would say too that one of the things that was really apparent about this adaptation is that it read to me more like a political drama, like a modern TV show, like a West Wing or a Succession or anything like that. It just seemed like a Washington, D.C. or UN for the Europeans. But everything felt like we were watching a political drama because of the choices that were made.
Yes.
What did you think of Kit's Henry, like the progression from that hesitant or uncertain Henry to the end?
I think this kind of generally goes with my general take on this production, which is it's again a very serious war play. And Kit is a very serious Henry and completely leaves behind Prince Hal. We do see his reaction to Bardolph's execution, which Bardolph's execution is very gruesome.
Yeah.
I do think that we get some beautiful moments with Kit's Henry in the Pistol Henry scene and the Williams Bates scene. I think those are really nice. But then, you know, as we go towards the end of the play, we lose the like charm of Hal because of some, and that's not on Kit as an actor. That's like the production choices. We cut the glove prank, so we don't get to see this moment where Prince Hal sort of like that personality trait, that prankster, pops up again.
Yeah.
And then the marriage at the end is, like you said, it's very political. It's not romantic at all.
No.
So we lose, I think, the Henry as written, who there's the potential to be charming and self-deprecating when he is Henry the person and not the office of king.
Yeah. I agree with those points that you made. I think those are correct. And I also was really struck by the kind of barbarism that Henry V, Henry the king, Henry the soldier was using. Like, there are obviously, like the scene at Harfleur, the language is very barbarous. It's like, we are going to, you know, kill women and children. We're, you know, that threat. And this production chose to really lean into Henry being that brutal. He was also that brutal when he said, every soldier kill his prisoners. And it was like all of the French soldiers were lined up at a firing squad. So this play really was like, we're going to talk about modern politics, modern warfare, and the barbarism.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the question, of course, is like, they're clearly making choices that are steering away from Shakespeare's text. Like, they're saying Shakespeare's text,
yes,
but the meaning is, and the intent is,
they're very much trying to say something else with this production.
Yeah. So there was no glove prank, but the Fluellen pistol leak scene was not funny at all. It was like Fluellen was literally going to choke Pistol, like trying to get him to eat that leak. So, I mean, my overall take was that like the politics in this production were incredibly clear. And I think that generally, like, I think that the play did take a good job of like treating the different sections of like different groupings of characters with care. but it was like it was much more concerned with the political message of barbarism, modern warfare.
Mm-hmm.
And that made it just kind of just very intense, a very intense play from top to bottom.
I would agree with that. Again, I think with both of these, there's this when we focus on the war in this play to the point that we like lose the humanity in war that is in there, which means like the comedy, like it can wear on the audience, I think. And Shakespeare includes comedy for a reason. It's there to be a pressure release in between the barbarism. So I also think that like keeping comedy in does not mean that this message would have been cheapened. I think it could have been heightened. Again, like if we allowed for these characters that are written to be funny, it would have also highlighted it would have given contrast to Henry's arc, because we're able to have a little breath and then go, oh, oh no.
Yeah. What you're saying about the contrast, I think that really then, especially because these characters like the Eastcheap Company, who are all working class or common people, they're all working people, and the captains who are all not English people, choices can be made to make the humor out of like things that are offensive to working people and people who are not British. But they can also just be funny because the characters are funny. Like you can make choices around the kind of potential classism that can show up in the Eastcheap Company or the xenophobia that comes with the soldiers. Like you can be creative and make choices to make it funny. And then also if those characters are like lighting up our, evening, it really shows the impact that like the king's power has on people who have no vested interest in this.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. And if we see those people die, if we see those people who have made us laugh suffer at the hands of this person, like it could have, I think this production could have been even more successful, allowing some humor in the B and C plots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that similar to Branagh's, I wouldn't show the entire production to a classroom to talk about this play, but scenes. There are some really fantastic scenes. There's some really great acting. So picking and choosing.
Yeah, same. And last but not least, we have The Globe 2012. This was directed by Dominic Dromgoole and stars, where is he?
Jamie Parker.
Jamie Parker as Henry V, with again a very talented ensemble cast.
Before we talk about
a little bit about this one?
Yeah. I saw this play in 2012 at the Globe Theater when I was there for a study abroad during my undergrad. So I had the delight of like being a groundling, looking up at Jamie Parker as he gave the St. Crispin speech. But it's funny because I really enjoyed it, but 2012 Kourtney had no clue what was going on. I remember the St. Crispin speech, and I remember loving the Henry Catherine scene. And I think I probably laughed at a bunch of stuff, but like I really didn't understand the history plays when I saw that play. So it was really great to revisit it and remember like, oh, remember, more than 10 years ago when I saw that and I experienced Jamie Parker in the Globe Theater, and then to actually watch it knowing what's happening.
Yeah. I really enjoyed it. This is my first time seeing it. And my biggest like takeaway for this one is that this feels like the polar opposite of Kenneth Branagh's production in many, many ways. First of all, we have humor.
We have so much humor.
There's so
We're
much
having a
like,
good laugh.
Yeah. I also like they have the chorus remain on stage very intentionally and like become an observer and like kind of presence in Act 1, Scene 1. And I really enjoyed that. And then Act 1, Scene 1 is like Canterbury and Ely, they've staged as like a very casual conversation about like, so what do you, and like they're like washing their hands, and the business adds humor to this.
Well, they were talking business while they were doing their business, because I want to be more specific, Elyse.
Yes.
They were in the toilet.
Yeah.
Which Kit Harington should have done as the descendant of
John Harington, inventor of the flush toilet.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just makes, by making that scene like so casual as they're like preparing to go talk to the king, it really adds levity to it. Whereas every other version of this was like two men of the church whispering in a dark corridor about very serious things.
Yeah.
And so it just immediately set us off on, I was like, oh, this is different. Oh, this is a breath of fresh air.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. It opens with such a lighter tone, but it also does have this kind of like foreshadowing a war because at the top with the chorus, like musicians come onto the stage with the chorus and there's like the beating of drums. So we have these two indicators of the tone. You've got the drums that are like, oh, war is going to happen in this play. And then this lighter tone that like, you're also going to laugh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Jamie Parker's Henry is very different. 180 to Branagh and Kit. He is charismatic. He is good-natured. I would even call him a lad.
Yeah. He is not far removed from Prince Hal.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But he's not debaucherous. He doesn't get into shenanigans, but he has a good time.
He's good-humored.
Yeah.
You can believe that he was an imp of fame.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And all the gals are like swooning. Yeah. There was this just a tangent. So when I saw the play, I also went to a talk back with Jamie Parker. And for some reason, this tweet got brought up. Somebody was tweeting about the play. They were tweeting about Jamie Parker, and they were a groundling. And I guess like because it's the Globe, the audience, it's, you know, open air with like natural lighting.
Shared light, yeah.
Yeah, shared light. And so Jamie Parker made eye contact with the groundling, and she tweeted about that, and she said, Jamie Parker looked at me, bam, I'm pregnant. Like he yeah, he's just he's so charming.
He's very charming, and he's very they do not have the flashback sequences to the Eastcheap Company, and it's just as effective. You don't need to have such a deep understanding of of King Henry's connection to the Eastcheap Company.
The Eastcheap Company was just so funny across the board. Like the pistol Nym sword fight, which is cut from the other. Well, it's still in the Donmar one. I think it's cut from the Branagh one. The pistol Nym / Bardolph by extension.
There's
sword
a confrontation.
Fight. Yeah, but it was so funny, and it was funny in a way that like I felt like they were making fun of these characters, not like as in they're low class, but like these characters live within their own kind of code. Like they have their own honor system. It was so funny. It was so funny. And it set the tone, I think, also for Pistol and the comedy that's to come with him.
Yeah.
And Mistress Quickly was funny. She was like wailing and crying and just being very dramatic. And it was just such a different take than the very serious conversations that they had in the Donmar and the Branagh adaptations or versions.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier Jamie Parker's St. Crispin's Day speech.
Yeah.
And this was a speech that gave me goosebumps because he chooses to do very much the opposite of Branagh. Kit Harington does sort of a mix, I would say, of the two. But Jamie Parker's Crispin's Day speech is said to the groundlings and is quieter, more intimate, and very powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, it's of course to the nobles that he's in scene with, but then there's a moment where he acknowledges the audience that's there today, and it transcends for a moment. It's very, very powerful.
Yeah, yeah. When he said like, "We happy band of brothers," it was like every single person on stage, everyone in the yard, everybody in the bench seats, everyone is a band of brothers. And it really like made it clear why there's this like optimism around the battle. Yeah. It was very delicious. And I think also that helped to translate to like the Bates Williams scene where this Henry is like really trying to convince the others. And at a certain point, it seems like himself that they're all in this together, that he's not just going to be ransomed and leave his soldiers behind to be killed on the battlefield. And so that kind of distinction, I think, really is set up with this kind of brotherhood that Henry believes in, that maybe some of the other soldiers don't believe in.
Yeah, I also love the pistol Henry scene. Again, is very tender, very sweet. And like you said, like it is this like him going on this journey of realizing that not everybody believes in this as much as he does, and having to convince them, and also then reconvince himself that this is the right thing to do. And it is a war play. War is going on, but it is much more about like the leader who is making the decision and the weight of the decisions, which, as we've talked about, is like a little bit of what was possibly being written at that time of like, how do rulers make these decisions? And it's what Henry speaks to of like, rulers have to think about every single subject, a good ruler. And you really saw that Henry.
Yeah, I agree. I also want to talk about how much I enjoyed not just the Eastcheap Company, but also the captains. I really enjoyed Fluellen.
I love Fluellen.
Yeah, he was like the biggest kiss ass. Like he was such a teacher's pet. He was such a suck up in a way that I think is complemented in the kind of research that we discussed about the kind of competing nations. He's the most assimilated into Britain and the cause. But it was done in such a funny way. He like had his shoulders back the whole time. He had kind of like a, I don't know, a stride about him. And because Pistol and Fluellen had been so comically developed, the if you can mock a leak, you can eat a leak scene was so funny. It had like a lot of slapstick. It wasn't like barbarous. It was just funny. I just laughed.
Yeah. Was this the one where he like ate the leek and then like spat it out really slowly
into like the jug or whatever in Gowers? Yeah.
And then we get this like towards the end, this Henry who is back to being, you know, a little unsure, a little self-deprecating in his scene with Catherine. There's a moment where the King of France is about to come back in, and Henry says, "Here's your father," and he's so flustered that he like can't put on his cape. And I was like, that scene is funny. Both of them are funny. Yeah,
Henry is just very bad at flirting. And one of the things that's so great about the shared light is that, like Shakespeare's audience, the actor can look to the audience and use them. And it adds this like just dynamic kind of feel to the scene where like, you know, you don't have to do it in this scene because he's got two scene partners. But Henry, as he's trying to flirt with Catherine, he's like self-deprecating, he doubts himself, but he also looks to the audience and gives them looks and kind of like he's able to incorporate not just Alice and Catherine, but everyone else. Like, you know, if you're at, you know, an event trying to flirt with somebody and then you turn to your friend and give them this look that's like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah, I love I don't think this is the right word, but there's a like casualness that shared light can contribute to a production because it allows for that sort of like moments of like commentary on the action.
Yeah.
In a way that like a more presentational production like the Donmar where it's lights down and you're going to watch our play doesn't allow for. So yeah, I also really enjoy, I think that the shared light and the way that they use it in this production is very effective to help tell the story and to help add levity.
And on top of that, it really gave Jamie Parker the opportunity to be likable.
Yeah, it adds likability. Speaking of likability, should we talk about what our favorite, from these three, what are some of our favorite things? So starting off, who was your favorite Henry?
My favorite Henry was Jamie Parker. Hands down.
Yeah.
I liked how he interpreted or how he was directed to interpret the like Henry/Hal from the past. I liked how he was able to relate to the audience. I like how he related to all the other characters. There's just something off-putting to me about a super stoic, serious Henry. And the text could support that, but also the text can support a good-natured guy.
Yeah, I agree. I also think because Jamie Parker also had the opportunity, they did Henry IV Part 1, Henry IV Part 2, and then Henry V in sequence with him playing this character throughout. So I think he also has a bit of a benefit that maybe these other two actors did not have in terms of like really having gone on Hal's journey.
That's a good point.
At least recently, like with sort of like this same team. And so I agree. Jamie Parker is my favorite.
Well, let me go to you. What's your favorite Henry Catherine?
I think Branagh and Thompson.
Really?
I think that their scene together is very charming. My one little thing with the Globe production is that for me, the Catherine felt very young. And while I really enjoyed their final scene, that was something that I was just like, the way she's been directed, this actor might not be that much younger than Jamie Parker, but she feels very young.
Yeah.
And I don't love that. But I do really enjoy the scene between Branagh and Thompson.
Yeah, it was the word that I used genuine and sincere to describe that scene with Branagh and Thompson. I still think that my favorite is the Jamie Parker scene. I totally agree with your assessment of Catherine being directed quite young to act very playful and kind of
Hmm.
naive and juvenile.
Hmm.
She could have definitely been not aged up personally, but in terms of her behavior, her mannerisms. But there was just such a funny dynamic between Henry V, Catherine, and Alice.
Mm-hmm.
I think because I just wanted to laugh. I also watched that after both the Donmar and the Branagh. So I think I was just looking for a good laugh.
Yeah.
But I will give Branagh and Thompson credit. Very genuine, very sincere,
Yeah.
very cute wooing scene.
And then how about you for favorite St. Crispin's Day speech?
Jamie Parker. He's like all of them for me. I don't know if it's fair. I'm just like,
All of
across
them.
the
Yeah.
board, all of them. Again, like there's that connection that Jamie has to the audience, and there's this sincerity, and there's this
Hmm.
that heart that he takes into the scene
Yeah.
that I think it goes against expectations, and it's just a success.
Yes, I would agree with that. I think that it goes completely against what you expect that speech to be, and it is one of the more beautiful, in my opinion, but other people's opinions too. It's often on the like best speeches lists,
Hmm.
and to hear that speech or to hear like what piece of work is a man said simply and genuinely is so wonderful. So yeah, that's for me too. Also, yeah, being included is really cool.
Yeah, yeah. Brana did well as well. I did like his. I think that Brana was able to add some humanity into his Henry through St. Crispin's and
Hmm. And I think Kit's was good too. Like this is like literally inches and like
yeah, and I think a lot of it too has to do with like the choices are directorial choices. There's directorial choices that make something kind of stand out.
hmm. Yeah, because Kits is also good for me. It starts off soft and intimate as well, and then it like builds to this rallying cry. So it's somewhere like right in between the two for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think both Brana and Harrington, their speeches are good, what you expect St. Crispin's to be. And because Jamie Parker does something different and is able to pull it off really well, that's why.
Yeah. Yeah. What was your favorite battle scene?
Mm,
They were all very different.
they were very different. I'm torn.
Hmm.
I'm torn between Brana and the Globes because Brana, you get to see everything
Yeah.
and it's extended and it's really cool to see. But then the Globes is like what we were told we were getting in the text, which is like when you hear horses, imagine horses. And like there's very few of us on stage, but you got to like imagine that it's a whole war. And I think that they do that very effectively.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that your reasoning for both is why I'm torn as well. Just the sound effects that are used through simple instruments and the kind of slow motion choreographed movement with weapons is really, really effective. And then like smoke and things like that, not the stinky kinds from the early modern uh, era. But then, of course, every time there's a war play, it's like so nice to see real horses and
Hmm.
real, the
Swords
combat,
and
real
real
swords.
real combat.
Yeah.
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 Well, to wrap us up, what was your favorite? I think I have a guess. What was your favorite overall production?
Take a guess. What do you think?
I think we're in agreement that we both really enjoyed the 2012 Shakespeare's Globe production.
Yeah.
Like this is one that I want to show people.
Yes.
I want to immediately rewatch and say, look at how good Shakespeare can be with minimal set, really only costumes and hand props, and look at how engaging and how riveting it can be.
Yes. Yes. There's something to the simplicity of actors who, and of course, all three casts have very talented actors. So this is not a cut to anyone, but the simplicity of just standing on a stage and saying the lines and understanding the lines and saying the lines. And I
Mhm.
think one of the criticisms I have of the Brana film is merely my criticism with most Shakespeare films is that, like, because of the medium, actors don't enunciate as much.
Yeah.
Actors kind of whisper lines. And there's this necessity for me to hear the very enunciated, very, like Shakespeare played with language.
Hmm.
And so there's a lot of stuff that goes missing in films for me because of the delivery of lines.
Yeah.
I don't know if you feel that way, but I lose things. There's some lines and there's some scenes that are like, oh, totally get it. And then some of them I'm like, I don't know what you said, and I read the play a few times.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that there's things that film is very good at, like we said, showing us things that we can't achieve in theater,
Mm-hmm.
but we do lose specificity of language. We lose
Mm-hmm.
the amount of space that a theater has, literally, because you're just so close to an actor.
Mm-hmm.
So, intimate things work really well, but it's really hard to have an actor play as small as they need to and say these things that are like very, very big and, are meant to be said to a crowd of hundreds outside.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that there's things that like film loses, especially with more epic plays like this.
Mm-hmm.
So, just to wrap up, are there any sort of like final thoughts that watching these Henry Fives left you with? I know I have some.
Yes. My first one is comedy.
Mm-hmm.
Keep the comedy, make me laugh. It's in there for a reason. And I think that directors should be careful with like how they overpower certain elements of the plays in favor of other ones.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen this in like 12th Night where we lost the comedy. So certain parts of the play don't work because it's seated, like it's got the tone, the genre of a romance. This one, it got lost because it didn't fit the tone of the film. So
Mm-hmm.
that's one thing for me that really stood out. Another is how much I want to like Henry and
Mm-hmm.
how not liking Henry as much puts a damper on my viewing experience.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just picky because I'm in love with Jamie Parker, but
No, it's interesting that you say that. There's this concept that comes from Aristotle's Poetics of the six elements of drama, and one of them is character. And like to very simplify it, it's essentially that like your character needs to be someone we can root for. Now, Aristotle's writing before we have the concept of the anti-hero. But at the same time, like you still root for the anti-hero because you understand why they are the way they are. And I think that you have to be able to understand and like empathize with your main character in order to justify the play. So yeah, I would agree that like trying to make Henry unlikable makes the play difficult. And it also is working against the text that Shakespeare wrote.
yeah. Well, what about you, Elyse? What were your takeaways, your overall takeaways from this weekend of Henry V?
Um, Similarly, I think that you have to be careful approaching this as just a war play. It is a war play. It is a play about war. It's also about people in wartime. Yeah, I have a lot of similar thoughts that you did, to be quite honest.
Mm-hmm.
Keeping Henry human, I think, is incredibly important for this play. I think that's the arc that we are following is somebody struggling with what he wants and the impact it's going to have. And the difference of who he is as a person versus who he has to be in the role. And I think that allowing him to have different sides of his personality is important.
Yeah. And the last thing I'm thinking about is in particular with Donmar Warehouse, because you're mentioning liking Henry in spite of the war crimes.
Mm-hmm.
And this production in particular was very much intending to subvert the ending. And in those cases, it's not like you can't do that.
Yeah.
But how effective is it?
Yeah.
How does it affect the rest of the play? Is this the play to make that message? Those are all questions to consider.
Yeah. Because he certainly has other plays about the violence and examining war and what it does to people. So is this the play that is best for that? Well, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But overall, I would say I just want to have more laughs when I see Henry V. So
I don't want to see the laughs completely abandoned because the play features war. I think that like artistically it's also very important. It's a hallmark of his tragedies is that he gives this little humor pressure relief, especially right before something really bad's about to happen.
Yeah.
And it allows the audience to reset a little and have a greater emotional impact when the next bad thing happens. We can't appreciate light without the dark or dark without the light. So I think that's my big takeaway is like if we're going to spend so much time showing the audience who Henry was when he was known as Hal, we can also spend a little time keeping some funny in to like make us like those characters if we're going to over explain who they are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, With that, we've got one more to talk about, but if you want to listen to our take on The Hollow Crown, you'll have to join us over on our Patreon.
Yeah. We happy band of brothers here at Shakespeare Anyone podcast. We came, we saw, we conquered Henry V.
And thank you for listening.
I'm Kourtney Smith.
And I'm Elyse Sharp.
This is Shakespeare Anyone.
Thank you so much for listening to Shakespeare Anyone. Works referenced in this episode are available in the episode description. Our theme music is Never Ending Minute by Sounds Like Sander.
If you would like to support us, visit shakespeareanyone.com/support or check out the links in our episode description. You can also hit the subscribe button, like us, leave a comment, write a review, share us on social media, tell a friend about us, all the things. We'd appreciate it. For more, you can visit our website, shakespeareanyone.com, or follow us on Instagram at ShakespeareAnyonePod.
Now, because you listened all the way to the end of the credits, here is a completely random Shakespeare quote for you. From Richard II, Act 2, Scene 4, said by Captain. The bay trees in our country are all withered, and meteors fright the fixed stars of heaven. The pale-faced moon looks bloody on the earth, and lean-looked prophets whisper fearful change. Rich men look sad, and ruffians dance and leap, the one in fear to lose what they enjoy, the other to enjoy by rage and war. These signs forerun the death or fall of kings.